If you enjoy this episode of the Workflows Photography Podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast player you are listening from.
Be able to get a scan of yourself, a highly accurate scan of yourself, that then you'll be able to just say, hey, put me in a Corvette flying down a desert highway, with wearing a red scarf flying in the wind.
Yep.
And there you are, photorealistic you.
Workflows is a podcast about saving you time and money in your photography business. I'm your host, Scott Wyden-Kifowitz, a photographer and content creator who struggles with dyslexia, color blindness, introversion, and anxiety stemming from years of being bullied as a child. Guess what? Workflows have been my rock. I have workflows for every aspect of my life. That's why I am so happy to bring you Workflows, a podcast presented by Imagine. As a company dedicated to saving you time and money in your photography business, it makes sense to enhance and expand the conversation to all things workflows. Tune in and subscribe to hear stories, strategies, and tools that can be your rock. Hear from people just like you. Get to work with Workflows. Oh man, I am so excited for this episode. This is a 1 hour and 50-minute conversation that I had with my friend Frederick Van Johnson from This Week in Photo. If you don't know, TWIP, his podcast, was actually acquired, and his community, his website, was acquired by SmugMug, who also owns Flickr, not long ago. And I sat down with Frederick to talk about the future of photography. This is part 1 of that episode. I split the episode because it was so long. I split the conversation to 2. So they're about 45 minutes each. I hope you tune in, listen to the whole thing, see what Frederick and I had to say about what is coming with the future of photography. Thanks for listening. Let's get right into it. TWIP Workflows Crossover. This is a unique thing that we're doing. It's very exciting, new to both of us, and I can't wait to see where this conversation goes. Frederick, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Yeah, I think we're onto something here. We're crossing the flows. We're experimenting with different prompt structures, right? That's what we're doing with this show. And I think, we're mixing it up a little bit, So, we both have a ton of ideas over the different topics that we discussed that we're going to cover in this episode. And yeah, it makes sense. Like, we've got your chocolate, my peanut butter. We'll put them together and we'll see what comes out at the end of the day. At the end of the day, the listeners will benefit because they get to hear a new voice on both of our platforms.
Yeah.
And, and a mixture of ideas. And just real quick before we kick it off, for the TWIP listening audience, just a heads up of what this experiment is about. And I know I probably covered this, future me covered this in the intro for this episode. But I'm going to rehash it just in case that guy dropped the ball. But Scott and I had this, Scott actually had the idea of doing this sort of collaborative podcast episode. And I agreed. I thought, yeah, what a great idea. How come I didn't think about that? And that's where we both get on, talk about the topics that we have outlined, and then, kind of syndicate or publish on both platforms. So
yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
Crossover. Yeah. It's like Chicago PD meeting Chicago Fire meeting Chicago Med, except it's only 2 of us.
There you go. Something like that. I like chocolate and peanut butter. That's bad.
Yeah. It all works.
Yeah.
You and I have known each other for quite some time, and I'm glad, I've been on your show, I think once or twice.
Yeah, I think twice.
I can't remember if you were on the last podcast I hosted, but I'm glad that, we're doing this. And yes, for all the Workflows listeners, this is a fun thing. If it goes well, hopefully Frederick and I can do more of these. But this is experiment number 1, and we'll see what happens. So
yeah.
With that,
let's
let's dive right in. So this whole conversation that we're about to have is about a variety of different things with the future of photography. We're going to touch on AI and a whole bunch of automations and things like that. The first thing I wanted to discuss was the fact that AI has actually been in our cameras for quite some time at this point.
Yeah.
And, I figured it'd be nice to just touch on the different aspects of where AI is in our cameras, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's in several areas in there. One of them out there, the most obvious one is autofocus, and how autofocus is getting better and better is largely attributable to the artificial intelligence or machine learning inside the
yeah.
camera themselves. And what is that, right? So, yeah, great. My camera has AI in it, but does that mean it's an Android? No, it means the makers of the camera taught it to recognize certain things and understand those things and weight them
Yeah,
differently in the frame and do things based on that weighting, i.e., oh,
yeah,
a bird in the sky. Maybe that's what they
yeah.
want. Versus in the olden days, right? It was other ways that they detected what the subject was, whether it be motion or
Contrast.
contrast.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, those kind of
yeah,
things. Now it can still do those. I'm sure they're
yeah,
still using those, but as they're using all of this stuff in concert together to
yeah.
get that amazing result, like on the Nikon Z9 and the Z8 now, I'm guessing,
Mhm.
the autofocus of those cameras is just, kind of heralded of being borderline magic, right? That
Yeah,
Arthur C. Clarke style magic, where
yeah.
and then cameras like Lumix on the Panasonic side, which is I'm an owner of both. In fact, I'm on the Lumix camera right now. But back in the day, and Panasonic is aware of this. One of their Achilles heel weak points has been the focusing on Micro Four Thirds cameras.
Mm.
So right, so add a little AI to the sauce, and suddenly you get
It's
what
much better.
photographers have been begging for. Right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like, the AI for focusing started with faces, I think was the first,
Yeah.
recognizing overall faces,
Hmm.
and it worked well because as soon as you return the head, your focus would get a little confused if it was face recognition. Even that's gotten smarter to still follow the face as the face turns, right? Following the
Hmm.
the, the head rather than the face. Then it moved into human eyes. It's moved into animal eyes, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But then moving beyond faces became object detection. So now, as you
Hmm.
said, like birds,
Hmm.
um, full people, so you can detect full people in certain cameras. My favorite, even though I don't shoot this, but I know there's a lot of, at least there's a lot of Imagine users that I know of, and I'm sure there's a lot of SmugMug users and Flickr users that are doing this. But like car racing, right? So NASCAR, for example, there's now cameras that can detect
Yeah.
objects like cars
Hmm.
driving by
Hmm.
super fast.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
object detection, and then the absolute kicker is what, I think I don't know if Sony's doing it, but I know Canon and Nikon are doing it now, where it's eyeball focus detection. So as you're looking through the EVF, it can detect where your eye is looking and focus on whatever. So instead of you having to, hit the autofocus button to focus the camera, it's just focusing on where your eye looks.
You know what?
That
Is
is
that
mind blowing.
new, Scott? Is that new? Because I remember I think it was Canon. I wanna say
Mhm.
Canon way back in the day developed something, and I don't know if it's still in the cameras, as I don't shoot Canon, I'm not sure what the platform is like, but I remember there was this tech where it would look at your eye. It'd be looking like there's a little tiny emitter in the view in the eyepiece
Mhm.
that would l essentially, it was kinda I think it was smart and smartly executed, but very kind of ham-handed because it was instead of using, the artificial intelligence was like, "Oh, I know this is an eye and there's a retina and it's
Yeah,
looking over there and,
yeah,
oh, it's dilated or closed down, so it must be looking at this certain distance." It's not doing
right.
all that stuff. That one was looking at the whites of the eye.
Mhm.
So if it saw a lot of white in an eye, it knew the eye was probably looking in that direction
Right.
because the retina would have to be over there. Therefore, it could use that information and put the focus area in that area of the screen to give it
Yeah.
a kind of a head start on what you're looking at. I'm not.
Yeah,
I know I'm not doing the technology justice, but that's kind of
right,
it's
right,
kind of
right.
what I. Do you remember that? Do you remember that feature?
I
That
do, and
yeah,
I'm sure it was sort of built on that framework.
yeah,
Now it is what you just described where it pinpointing everything. So
yeah,
like the wedding industry now, it's sped up so many photographers in camera workflow because now it's less half touching or less AF on buttons or back button focusing.
Or just
Um,
focus in general, right? Just focus,
yeah, yeah.
focus. I'm aging myself, but the first camera I owned was, well, I didn't even own it. It was an Air Force camera, and the
Mm,
first camera I was issued was a Nikon F3 manual. Right, that
mm,
thing was full on manual with the focus
yeah.
prism. Your older listeners will understand the focus prism that you had to get it
Yep,
together, and then your image was. So you had
yep,
the thing was, not to make this a focusing episode, but your skill as a photographer had to be such that you could internalize making sure the shot was sharp, i.e. locked in. If it was moving, that was a whole nother bag of worms because you had to
yeah,
track it and, keep the shutter button down. So it was that along with all the other bits, whether it's composition, exposure, lighting, all that stuff. So all that stuff had to be in play in your head at the
yeah,
moment of capture. And you fast forward to this glorious future we live in, and that part is lifted off of our shoulders. And I don't think it makes, people can argue this in the comments or whatever, but I don't think it makes you a better photographer or a worse photographer now that you don't have to worry so much, if at all, about focusing. I think it makes you, if anything, it lifts the weight off of your brain to have to worry about, it was that shot in focus that I
right,
thought about the composition, and I
right.
wanted that tree there, and I wanted this, and then I had to interact with the subject and get him or her to
Yeah.
smile and do all these things. Now
I think,
focusing is off the table, right?
yeah, I think the word you just said, interacting with the client more,
Yeah.
is like the key there because now the less that you have to think about, or like you're thinking about it, but the less you have to like physically, your brain, some of your brain power has to be focused on autofocus, for example, or manual
Yeah.
focus, for example, or
Yep.
changing your shutter, changing your aperture, whatever it is. The less brain power you have to give to that means the more brain power you have to connecting and interacting with your client. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So
um,
it just gets us,
yeah,
it just makes us better. Yeah.
yeah,
And the other, I think, just to, put another nail in that coffin of that particular bullet
yeah, yeah.
is, Apple with their Apple Vision Pro headset that they just
Mhm.
came out with. So I've never touched that thing. I've probably seen as much as anybody else has seen about it, but it knows where you're looking as well, because it's got a
Yeah,
series of cameras and sensors in there that are looking at your
staring at
eyes,
you.
so that, yeah, so it can do all sorts of things like
Yeah,
what are they looking at, what should be in focus, what should not be
yeah,
in focus, how much processor speed should
yeah,
I apply to that part of the screen versus where they're not looking. All
yeah,
that stuff is happening. I gotta imagine those sorts of technologies, much like, I don't know, like when smartphones launched, right? When and started proliferating around the planet and became the
mhm,
norm, other industries popped up because of smartphones and other technologies, like the miniaturization of compasses to go in the devices, the accelerometer, the altitude sensor. All those things went
yeah,
in miniaturized on a chip into this device to make that device possible. This
yeah,
new device, the Apple Vision Pro, has other technologies in there that I gotta imagine are gonna find their way into other industries,
yes,
some existing, some that we don't even know about yet are gonna show
yeah.
up because of what Apple and their trillions of dollars are developing into this kind of new platform. So,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
mean,
exciting.
not to get too sidetracked on like outside of photography, but like imagine
Mhm.
that technology that's in these, VR goggles.
Yeah,
That's what I'm gonna call
they
them.
are. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that they're now in your car and you look off the road and now your car is yelling at you for looking off the road.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
cars do that
so
now. They do that now.
do,
They have that built into the Teslas and many of the
to,
electric. So when there's self-driving in there, right? So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
true, true. Yeah.
yeah, they make sure
So
that you're paying attention to the road, which I don't like. I don't. It's one thing to have that in my camera and to assist me with making a better photo.
when
It's
your life's
another
on the
thing to,
line.
yeah, to have well,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I know it's for safety and everything, but
Yeah.
I feel weird when I feel like, okay, someone's watching me,
Yeah.
and I'm driving, even if it's an entity, an AI, or my
Yeah.
car or whatever for my own good.
Yeah.
It's like it feels a little invasive. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
That's just
mind
me.
the car looking at the road for me, but I don't want it looking
Yeah.
at me.
Don't look at me. Don't look at me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
then
moving on to
when
the
you
next.
doze off and hit somebody, then you're like, okay, well, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Damn you, car. Um, so there's a bunch of other newer AI technology that's making its way into apps. Some of again have existed for some time. That I think are, for one example, being something very beneficial to stock photographers, commercial photographers, landscape photographers. Some cases, potentially, wedding photographers could utilize this. But there's XIR Photo, XIR Search, XIR Photo, like this company
Mhm.
who makes it scans your photos. The XIR Search is a Lightroom plugin. XIR Photo is a standalone app, and it basically looks at your photos, analyzes what the photo is, and creates keywords for you on a variety of factors. And On One just came out with theirs on. Well, we're recording this on June 21st. That's a Wednesday. On Monday, what was it? The 19th, I guess. On One came out with their own version of that, which is a standalone app. There's no Lightroom plugin, at least right now. And it also does the same thing.
Mhm.
It just scans your photos for keywords and adds the photos to the metadata. You can then load it up in Lightroom, and now you've got all those keywords in Lightroom or in
Yep.
Photoshop or wherever. And I feel like I've used both at this point. I've only used On Ones for a couple of days at this point, but it's a it's amazing. As somebody who loves landscape photography, I find it amazing how accurate and interesting the keywords can come up with.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on those?
I agree. Yeah, I know the folks over at Exire, from the top on down, the great
Mhm.
folks that are, genuine folks that are working on genuine software that solves a genuine, I don't know if you want to call it problem, but uh, an annoyance to photographers,
Yes,
right?
an
And that's
annoyance for
that whole
sure.
keyword. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's my annoyance with keywording comes in when I see friends of mine, like, I don't know, Photo Joseph or somebody like that, who's all in and meticulous on their keywording and the hierarchies and all that stuff, and everything's perfect. He could find the hair on a dog from 19, you know, whatever, and
Yeah.
but yeah, so in step a company like Exire and now On One with these,
Mhm.
a way to use artificial intelligence. In this case, AI is a weird term, right? Because it's
Yeah.
thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
It covers a whole bunch of things, but everyone thinks it's only one thing. In the case of this, what they're doing with the keywording is, again, it's back down to machine learning, i.e.,
Yep.
brute force. Feed the machine a bunch of photos so that it knows what's what, and then when it sees something that looks like that, apply that tag to it. That's
Yeah.
all it's doing. So if it sees a red dog or a cat or
Mhm.
something, it's going to go, oh, that is a cat.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's the tree for cat:
Yeah.
feline,
Yep.
claws, blah. So it's going to
Yeah.
put all that stuff in there for you automatically, well beyond anything that you or I would ever feel like or want to do as a human. We can, through this kind of menial grunt work, over to the AI and have it do it more
Exactly.
efficiently than we could ever conceive of doing. And that
Yeah.
that's what it's for. I mean, it's brilliant. I did a whole tutorial for the Exire folks. I think
Mhm.
they may still have it on their site, where and I kind of walked through the software and demoed all the different pieces of how it works and how it can fit in,
Yeah.
and it's magical, man. It
Yeah.
is it is really magical just to be able to see. And if you've been shooting for as long as I have, you probably have a library full of
Oh, yeah.
images, whether they're personal or kids and
Yep.
or work or whatever. But to be able to, with the power of a piece of software, after it indexes everything, to go in and say, yeah, show me every photo from when I went to
Yeah.
Las Vegas. Boom.
Yep.
Okay, show
Well,
me
I
every photo from when
yeah.
I went to the MGM Grand, or every
Yeah.
photo that has,
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's
I
it's
yeah,
very crazy.
a real world example of how I use Xire while working at Imagine, actually. So I've been at Imagine now for, we're approaching 2 years already, and, and it was this almost a year ago in a couple weeks. So it was, we were coming up to July 4th, to Independence Day here in the US,
Mhm.
and our social media manager was like, "Hey, does anybody have fireworks photos?" I was like, "I do." So I loaded up Lightroom, and I was using Xire Search, and I just literally just searched for the word fireworks, and I exported every photo that I've ever shot of fireworks ever into a bunch of JPEGs for him to choose from. It took me 2 seconds, and it was only due to having all my keywords in place thanks to Xire Search. So real
Yeah.
world, like
Yeah.
I had a need, and it solved it. So,
Yeah. That's why, when people complain about, oh, AI is going to take our jobs and blah 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 blah. Yeah, yeah, some jobs, absolutely. It's gonna eat them and spit them out,
Yeah.
that we can see it already, I'd be terrified if I were in some industries that are gonna be affected by this, whether it be people that write stuff or, even, as we see things sort of unfold, even, in the future, I predict we're gonna see certain industries, like even maybe headshot photography taking a
Mm,
hit because at a certain point, you're gonna be able to get a scan of yourself, a highly
yeah.
accurate scan of yourself that
Yep.
then you'll be able to just say, "Hey, put me in a Corvette flying down a desert highway,
Yep.
with wearing a red scarf flying in the wind."
Yep.
And there you are, photorealistic you. So there's these things,
Yeah.
I feel like those kind of jobs or those kind of tasks are in the crosshairs of this AI stuff. But then there's the other things also that get painted with the same AI brush, like keywording and these more mundane things that we
Yeah.
are like, "Oh, thank you, AI, for doing that."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I'm a
Exactly.
I'm a Grammarly holic. You know the app Grammarly?
Same.
I
Same.
use it to appear more intelligent than I am every day. Un and I'm not embarrassed to say that. Every day I use it. It's great. It's
Right now
fantastic.
we have Grammarly is attached to Frederick's brain, and right now we're hearing the intelligent Frederick. But once we remove that chip, he goes back to the
It's low key. It is low key Mrs. Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell was my English one of my English teachers in high school, and I remember, yeah, I she would correct me on certain grammar mistakes all the time. Like, oh,
Mm,
when you do a quotation mark, and you're quoting at the end of a sentence, the period needs to be inside the quotation mark, not outside, even though it looks like it
yep.
should. Things like that, or this should be hyphenated, or that should be, or
Yeah.
even the dreaded, where does the apostrophe go?
Hmm. Yep.
Especially when their name ends in S and you're talking about something that's not, so those
Yeah.
kind of things that trip up people, Grammarly catches those
Yeah.
for me. And over
100%.
time, if it catches them enough, I'm like, oh, I don't make the mistake anymore. So I don't make the mistake of putting the period outside of the quotation mark anymore because Grammarly has hit me over the head so many times. It's
Yeah.
now, I do it right. So I would argue that I'm smarter or at least better grammatically than I was a year ago because of using this software or
Yeah.
using these tools like Grammarly. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. You brought up the headshot thing. We're gonna get to generative imaging. Do you want to talk about
Yeah.
that now and go back to the other two topics, or do you want to
Yeah.
wait and
Why
come
not?
back to? All right. So generative imaging, right? Generative AI images, as
Hmm.
officially termed or whatever. I don't know. Um, I am. I have a love-hate relationship with these. I can find them to be useful. The whole headshot thing, like there's a website that exists. I tried it. You pay $20 or whatever, you upload 20 or however 20 to 50 something photos of yourself,
Hmm.
and then it literally creates headshots for you.
Yeah.
And
Lenza.ai is I think that's one of the tools
th
that does that. Yeah.
that's one of the tools. There's actually one dedicated to just headshots.
Oh, is it?
And
Oh, I need
yeah,
to know the name of that. I want to try it.
yeah, I'll look it up when we're done. But it's it does a decent job. I mean, it still doesn't look real. Some of them don't even look like you, but it does a decent
Yeah.
job. In fact,
Right.
at Shutterfest, like you go to a trade show, you go to WPPI, you go to imaging, whatever. There's always banners of the speakers and of the sponsors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
At Shutterfest on the trade show floor, they had banners, and this year, all the banners were of the speakers as AI, and
Oh,
it
wow.
was the talk of the show because 9 times out of 10, it didn't look like the speaker at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's
Maybe it
interesting.
looked like what the speaker wished they looked like.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I've played around with a lot of generative AI imaging tools, and I've seen workflows like Sam Hurd, for example, just put out a YouTube video showing how he's automating going from his Canon camera to Dropbox or to his FTP server, and then Midjourney's taking that and creating 4 potential variations on the photo and putting in a Dropbox folder and within like a minute, all in real time. And so it gives him to be able to like shoot with a client and then see a variation on what maybe he can try something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's potential really cool uses for it. I'm not a fan of just the create this image and it outputs it, right? Um, I
Yeah.
do like the whole Photoshop thing where it's like expand the scene, let it take your photo and some AI and fill in. But
Yeah.
yeah,
There's so much to unpack there. And
I
thank you for
know.
bringing that. Thank you for bringing it up. Like I said, like I told you before, I just got back from Infocom in
Hmm.
Orlando. I did a couple of, I sat on a panel that was talking about the future of streaming and how AI might affect that. And then I did a talk on uh, how basically it was my workflow and different ways that I'm using AI to enhance my workflow that I wasn't doing a year or so ago. But, it's on the generative side of things, like I said in the talk, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I lean more towards optimistic on
Yeah.
where this stuff is taking us, and heavily more towards optimistic, but with a healthy dose of pessimism and fear, right? To keep us to keep us alive, right?
Fear,
But
fear.
yeah, fear. Yeah. But that when I look at this stuff, especially the generative stuff, I can't help but be excited. To go back a little bit to your thoughts about just sort of headshot photography not being there yet, where people upload a series of images and it does the
Yep.
thing. We're in pre-alpha, I think, for
Yeah.
this stuff, right?
Yeah.
We literally, a lot of people don't. We're at the point now, like right now, you'd be hard pressed to find a person on the planet that doesn't know what an iPhone is, right?
Hmm.
It wasn't always that way, right? It was
Right.
at a certain point there were just a certain group of people, insiders that knew about it or knew it was coming or whatever. Even after all of Apple's launch plans or whatever, there's a certain contingent of the population on the planet are like, what? What's an iPhone? Whatever. And now, of course, everybody knows. We've been marinating in it for years now. So everyone knows what an iPhone is. And it has advanced to the point where these things, our phones are doing things that where we never conceived that they would go, right? They've birthed billion-dollar industries that we had no idea we needed 10, 15 years ago, like Uber and Lyft and those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
I look at AI, especially on the generative side of things, as being kind of that we're at launch at the beginning of all this. So you extrapolate out 10, 15 years or so, that's where photographers I think need to be looking, like kind of skating to where the puck is going to be. So if you look at where this stuff is pointing to right now with what Meta is trying to do, what Apple is trying to do, you kind of zoom out a little bit and look at what's happening with crypto and NFT and how that's going to work into this, and Midjourney and Photoshop with Firefly and how that's going to work into this new kind of these mini worlds that are being built. Look at what Nvidia is doing
Hmm.
with their hardware. It's hard to think of a scenario when super realistic Unreal Engine quality avatars of our persons are not going to be one of the next kind of Uber or Holy Grail companies where it's like, okay, yeah, you can instead right now it's like, okay, upload a bunch of photos, 2D crappy photos of yourself, and the AI will do some interesting tricks with it, right? That's kind of where we are now. But
Hmm.
imagine the world where you can go to a facility somewhere, I don't know, maybe it's a photo studio of the future, and get a full on perfect scan of your entire body as it stands right now. Of course, you'll be able to make modifications to it, if you don't like the way you look or whatever, but you'll have that data at a super high resolution uh, on a super high resolution scan that then you can do other things with. Like I said, put yourself in different situations, show up in Zoom calls, render a headshot for whatever. Will headshots even be necessary if somebody can just call up your virtual profile on LinkedIn of the future? So,
Yep.
it's those things. When I look at these technologies, Adobe and their forward thinking to put generative AI as a tool within Photoshop to give us a
Yep.
taste of what could
Brilliant.
happen. Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
Yep.
And it's scaring the crap out of a ton of people, I think,
Yeah.
cuz rightly
Yeah.
so. Headshot photographers, commercial photographers, like in that
Yeah.
same ilk, right, Scott? So the same ilk of, okay, I can go to a facility and get myself scanned in. Now I can put myself in whatever situation. I don't have to
Mhm.
worry about going to get a photo shoot. All my family's been scanned too, so I could do a Christmas photo that's appropriate for the time, and we're all in Christmas suits. I could generate that if I want to. Now, of course, yeah, you probably want to just shoot that because it's personal, but you could generate that. I think about it from the impact on commercial photography, though. So
Mhm.
what happens when company A decides, hey, we have this widget that we need a bunch of photos for the website, right? And they
Yeah.
just get that widget scanned in, much like
Yep.
car companies are doing today. They just
Yep.
they have full 3D representations of their cars. They can do whatever the heck they want to do with. Well, imagine when that's the whole world can do that with
Yeah.
anything, right?
Anything.
So
Yep.
yeah, it changes. It changes a lot.
Yeah, it is definitely, um, a little bit of caution, but a little bit of fear, but a whole lot of optimism.
Yeah.
It's a definitely mixed emotions when it comes to generative AI, but I am 100% in agreement with you. I think what Adobe has done so far, it's the natural progression of, here's what people are doing to manipulate photos already. Let's give them this AI to just take it to the next level and make it easy instead of having to go to Midjourney and do this to then go back to here, then go back to here. Just have it in
Yeah.
one place and have it easy throughout the software. Um, I think it's definitely a way to go. I still think, like, yes, it's beta, but it's definitely still
Hmm.
alpha.
Yeah.
Um, there's a way to go. I put out a video a few weeks back. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly with Photoshop's generative AI that's built in,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
showed I showed what it did great and what it didn't do so great.
Yeah.
Like when I asked it to replace a sock with a bird, and it made a sock bird puppet, and I was like, "It's not really what I asked it to do. It's funny, but it's not
Maybe it
actually
has a
funny."
sense of humor. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it does, but, um,
Yeah.
so let's go to something a little more, um, less scary in some cases, very, very productive, very workflow oriented,
Sure.
and actually happening now, which is
Yeah.
cool. Camera to cloud. So
Yes.
this is something that is, being pioneered and spearheaded by, um, Fujifilm,
Hmm. Hmm.
Imagine, SmugMug, who else is in on Skyloom is in on this,
Hmm.
um, and of course, Frame.io, which is Adobe, they're
Yeah.
in on this. So this is something that was, demoed lightly at Imaging USA, and by lightly, I mean informal, but they still put on a presence, um, and then more heavily demoed at WPPI,
Yeah.
and it was so cool. So the concept is, and even though it's a proof of concept, it's happening. Like, this is
Hmm.
happening. Um, and again, it started with Fujifilm. There's a good chance, very good chance, that a lot of cameras like Panasonic and Nikon and Canon will be doing stuff like this. But you shoot in camera with, right now, the Fujifilm cameras, two of them that do this.
Yeah.
The photos go directly to Frame.io as well as the memory card. So you got it in both places. You got your raw file on the memory card. You got a raw file that went to Frame.io directly. No phone needed in between. It is then culled and edited by Imagen's AI, right? So right now it's being edited by Imagen. Culling can happen in the future just by flipping a switch, right? Um, but it's being edited by Imagen again through the cloud, and then it's being sent to a SmugMug gallery. My favorite part: the raw file sent to SmugMug with the XMP of the edits sent to SmugMug and the outputted JPEG
Yeah.
sent to SmugMug in a SmugMug gallery, ready for your client to see and order prints from.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. It feels like that's the holy grail, right? For me, it feels like that is the holy grail that a lot of photographers in a lot of different industries have been chasing for a while.
Yeah,
Photojournalists, for example, and
yeah,
sports photographers, like you're at the game, you know, in the olden
yeah,
days, well, the olden days you were shooting film, so there was that gap, right? And then when it went digital, it was the gap of the time that you can get over to some place to go through your images and upload them to AP or wherever,
mhm,
then you and now with this camera to cloud piece, we're kind of removing that last bit out of there as
yeah,
well, which I think which is a couple of topics to touch on there. The first one is, yeah, the convenience and
mhm,
the way that I feel like they're designing it, the technology to work. And yeah, for folks that don't know, just to set the stage here, my company, This Week in Photo, the podcast, the educational resource, et cetera, community, was acquired last year in 2022 by SmugMug to go along with Flickr and SmugMug as one of the three brands over there. So I had a heads up that this was coming, right? The whole Fuji and camera to cloud partnership between those, between SmugMug and Fuji. And, I look at this and I think, okay, at its core, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, at its core, we're replacing that long tether tools cable that I
Yeah.
have, when I'm shooting tethered and I got somebody in the studio and I shoot it and they can see it on
Yeah.
the screen and, oh
Mhm.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, but maybe try
Yeah.
not to smile, whatever. So that's the flow I was thinking. So that bandwidth of squeezing that JPEG, that XMP sidecar file, that raw file, all the
Yeah.
data is, in the case of tether tools, is going through that cable, that orange cable to your computer. In the case of this, it's
I
going
love
to
that
the
orange cable, by the
cloud.
way.
I love my orange cables. Yeah, I had to throw one away yesterday because it was old. It was an old connector.
Oh.
But instead, it's going to the cloud and then
Mm.
coming down to wherever, based on rules or where you want it to go. Like you
Yeah.
go to a SmugMug gallery that has certain permissions and
Yep.
access privileges set on it already.
Right.
For me personally, that's scary because I don't. I want it to go up there for me, but very rarely are my shots ready for human consumption, right out of camera. I need to do a little,
Right.
I gotta put some Frederick seasoning on them before other humans see them. So there's that. But if you're doing photojournalism, you're on the field somewhere and the news needs to happen
Yeah.
right now, boom, and it's on the editor's desk and they can make the
Yeah.
decision on what goes where. I think it's brilliant. But this isn't this, unless I'm missing something, this isn't necessarily brand new technology. I think the tech is new, what they're building. I have no idea
Mhm.
what magic they put in the software and hardware to make this work. But you remember back in the day, there was a company called iFi. You remember
Yeah.
iFi?
Yep. The
Yeah,
memory card
iFi
did the work.
memory card.
Yeah.
They had Wi-Fi. They had squeezed a
Yeah.
Wi-Fi transmitter
Yeah.
onto a little SD card that you'd stick
Yeah.
in your camera, and it would do something similar. You'd shoot, it
Yeah.
would record to the chip, to the memory of the card, but then
Yep.
also go to iFi servers, which
Mhm.
would then, based on your rules, syndicate that image out to different areas. The JPEG,
Yeah.
of course, right? But
Yes.
you could have it go to Flickr, you could have it go to
Yep.
SmugMug, you could have it go to wherever, all
Yeah.
these different places at the point of capture. But it was
Yep.
buggy and it was slow
Yes.
and it was JPEG
Yeah.
only and it was slow
Yeah.
and it was slow.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
it
I
didn't
think the
work.
magic
It didn't work.
I think the magic of what Fujifilm has done is they built it with, I believe it's Wi-Fi 6E
Mhm.
or whatever the latest Wi-Fi is. So it's like the
Yeah.
fastest possible Wi-Fi right now. And because it's built into the camera itself, not a memory card, it doesn't need that addition. It doesn't lose any of that transmit data that a memory card would give. So you're getting the absolute fastest it can possibly process. Through the Wi-Fi. So if you're on a Wi-Fi 6 network, you could potentially get almost a gigabyte speed of transfer
Which is
um,
crazy.
through Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that is a beautiful thing. And just to touch on the whole wanting to add the Frederick special sauce after you shoot the photos is that's where Imagine comes in, right? Like Imagine learns how you edit. So like you're getting it to your SmugMug gallery, but you're actually getting it edited the same way you would. So
Yeah.
that's the beautiful part. But
Right.
I have one of the Fuji prototypes, the Fujifilm prototypes.
Oh, cool.
I
Nice.
I haven't fully tested it as far as can I choose which photos go? Like,
Hmm.
but at the same time, like, do I want to choose which photos go? Because then I'm slowing myself back down again. You know what I mean?
I want
Like,
the choice. I want to be able to make the choice of whether I
yeah,
want everything, that every time I press the shutter, whatever you record, put
yeah,
that somewhere. Or I think what iFi did back in the day, if I'm remember, it's coming back to me. Like on the Nikon, I shoot Nikon, so on the
me
Nikons
too.
at least, there's a lock button on there where you can actually
Right.
lock an image. So
Yeah.
you could set it so it would only send up the images that you locked, which was
Right.
cool, right? Because you could be
Yep.
shooting, you're like, yeah, that one needs to go. Okay, no, this one needs to go. Or later when you're reviewing, you could pick and have those automatically
Yeah.
go up. So something like, I think it's not a one size fits all. It's got to be a situational type thing. But the speed, that I think that's the part where I need to see this work. I need to
Yeah.
try it in person
Mhm.
on something that's mission critical to see where the holes are. 'Cause
Right.
that's the only time you'll see if it's
Well,
actually
yeah.
viable, to put
I mean, I
it
can tell you
into battle.
yeah, at Imaging and at WPPI, which doesn't have great Wi-Fi on the trade
Right.
show floor and around the hotel, right?
Any trade
They
show.
so yeah, at Imaging, I think they had about, I wanna say, like, 15 prototypes around the
Mm.
trade show,
Mhm.
all people shooting all at once, and at WPPI, it was even more, it was probably over 20 prototypes all at once, and they were constantly going and showing the results, so
Well,
even with
Scott,
the
you've played with it. It's a great person to ask this question to. So you've
yeah,
seen it in action, you've played with
yeah,
it. You mentioned briefly earlier that your phone, you don't need the phone. And I think you were
right,
saying that more from the standpoint of you don't need to pair and then copy from the camera to your phone and then
correct.
send it somewhere that way.
W
But it is still using your phone, right?
No, it's
For
connecting
bandwidth.
directly. No,
So
it
is there
doesn't,
a
it
there's a
goes
cellular chip inside these Fuji cameras that
no,
it
it's Wi-Fi, it's Wi-Fi.
also,
Um,
so there's a Wi-Fi chip inside it, so
yeah,
which means it needs to connect to the local Wi-Fi and
correct,
send that way. So you're still kind of at the you know, you're under control of whatever Wi-Fi connection that you're connected to, and
correct,
but like you
correct.
said, in the case of a trade show, everybody and their mama is connected to that
Yeah,
Wi-Fi,
to the really
so it's
horrible Wi-Fi.
saturated.
Yeah,
And if it still worked in that situation,
yeah,
then I think we got something, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
and keep in
okay.
mind, like, if you're, let's go back to the NASCAR thing, you're shooting
Yeah,
NASCAR, maybe you've got yourself a 5G hotspot, and it's
yeah,
only you,
which I need.
and
Yeah, I need to get
and
one
now
of
you're
those.
good, right? And
Yeah.
I had to double check, I had the camera packed, right now because 'cause I'm gonna be using it next week, but I think I'll have to double check. I think it might have an Ethernet port as well, um, but I have to double check. So,
Oh,
in the grip, because it's a grip, too.
the camera itself is gonna have like oh, wow. Okay.
I think the grip might have it because the one that, they gave me has a grip attached, so I have 3 batteries at once for the camera.
If that's
Um,
true, double check that, because if that's true
you're
and you
talking
can
now you have
plug
gigabit.
well, yeah, well, you could plug, and especially if they're doing, power over Ethernet as well. So if you can bring in an Ethernet cable and have your camera charged at the same time and, basically tethered, and whatever it
Yeah,
shoots goes back, you basically have a remote camera at that
true,
point where you
true.
can set it up and just, go to
Yeah,
town
yeah,
wherever you happen to be, as long as you have that connection. But
yeah. I'll double
Wi-Fi
check, but
connection
yeah.
having the Wi-Fi connection is I guess that's the weak link, right? For now,
Yeah,
right? So
for now, yeah,
you need to have one of those pucks or whatever to give you that 5G wherever, or a Starlink account or something, so that you could shoot and share, but you still you need, it's not magic. It's not going to create something from nothing. So
right,
you need inter or Wi-Fi access in order to make this work, which I think
yeah,
more and more is becoming ubiquitous. A lot of today's
yeah.
cars have Wi-Fi built into them, right? So,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah.
The future's it's here. So,
Yeah. No, for sure.
this was part 1 of my conversation with Frederick. I would love for you to tune into the second episode, part 2 of this conversation, which is also live right now in all the podcast players. So, head right over to it. Check out part 2 right now. You have been listening to Workflows, presented by Imagine. To hear more from Workflows, to find links to our guests, and for an exclusive offer for Workflows listeners, please go to imagenai.com/podcast and be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time.